Today's story is Mirror, Mirror, What's Behind the Wall by GhostInk. The sound of rushing water can be heard through the house. The sun piercing through the window, shining against the floor, revealing the pale feet of a young child. No older than 9, Billy stood looking at the mirror within the bathroom, brushing his teeth for school later that day. Brown hair brightens against the light, and blue eyes like crystals. Spitting out the toothpaste from his mouth, he began leaving the room. Before leaving, however, a weird noise could be heard. Peering back inside, he didn't see anything. The sound itself continued to make him more curious. He looked through the bathroom. Nothing. Not a single thing. Almost giving up on the search, something caught his eye. Looking upon the mirror, he noticed something off about the door. A dark finger kept tapping against the door on the other side. Seeing this caused Billy to freeze up. It kept tapping and tapping and tapping on the door, making Billy even more afraid. Eventually, though, the door opened, revealing his older sister, Maisie. Confused as to why he was afraid, she walked up to him. "Hey, you all right?" she asked calmly. "Were you tapping on the door?" he asks. Looking confused, she shook her head. "No, I didn't even know you were in here," she responded. This just shook Billy a bit, but eventually he calmed himself, pushing it aside as more of his imagination. He did watch a horror movie last night. "Probably was just me seeing things," he said with an awkward smile. Maisie just rolled her eyes and smiled. "Go on, get ready for school before Mom gets mad," she chuckled. Billy nodded and quickly walked out of the bathroom. Although, as he did, he heard the tapping against the door again, but ignored it. Returning home from school later that afternoon, he was met with his sister in the kitchen cooking something up for dinner. He waved over to her with a smile, her doing the same. Running up the stairs, he ran into his room to unpack, throwing his bag onto his bed. He sat beside it and pulled out his homework. Not hesitating to start, he wanted to make sure he got everything done before the live stream that happened later that night. As he was about to start the first question, the strange tapping came back from before. It wasn't in his room though, but in fact, was still in the bathroom. Still shaken, he walked toward it with precaution. The bathroom was dark. The window curtains were held closed and the light was off. He quickly pushed the door open only to see nothing once again. He turned on the light and walked inside. The tapping was then heard again, but it was slow. Turning over to the mirror, he walked up to it, as he noticed that something was off. There was water dripping out of the mirror itself. He touched the water only to know that it was actual water. Curious, he stuck out his hand at the mirror, thinking he would just touch the mirror. His hand went straight through it. He jumped back instantly from what he had just experienced. "Maisie!" he yelled out. Not too long after, Maisie ran in worried. She saw that he was shaking and instantly hugged him. "What's wrong? What happened?" she asked worriedly. "My hand. It went through the mirror," he said. Confused, she looked at the mirror, seeing that it was perfectly fine. "What do you mean?" she asked. "See for yourself," he insisted. Curious, she raised her hand to the mirror merely inches away. Billy watched carefully, only to be disappointed a second later. She'd touched gently against the mirror, proving that it was solid. Maisie looked back at him. "See? Nothing. It's just a mirror," she said while crouching down to him. "Are you okay? Earlier this morning, you seemed a bit spooked." He knew trying to explain the tapping he both saw and heard would make him sound crazy. Shaking it off, He began to relax. "I don't know, just probably that movie last night," he responded. She then rolled her eyes and smiled. "This is why Mom says you shouldn't be watching horror movies." Billy nodded with a slight smile and ran out of the bathroom. It was about 9 at night, and he was reading his one chapter for the night. He sat the book down as he was getting ready for bed. Tucked into his bed, he turned off his light and closed his eyes, but only for a little while. The tapping returned once again, as if it was only drawing his attention. Trying to cover his ears, only making it worse. It only seemed as if Billy was the one that could hear it. Maisie never heard the tapping either. He sat up and quickly jumped off of his bed. There was a bat within his room, which he grabbed before finding his way to the bathroom. Turning on the lights, he stared dead into the mirror. Shaking a bit, he slowly put his bat towards the mirror. Every inch closer, he tensed up more. Eventually, finding the bat on the other side of the mirror. He swallowed down his throat as he approached further, climbing on top of the sink, walking through the mirror slowly, eventually finding himself on the other side. Climbing off the sink from the other side, he felt uneasy. The door was only slightly opened. Weird gray particles flowed through it. Cautiously, Billy opened the door only to be more confused. It wasn't dark. It was actually easier to see. A bright gray filled the entire hallway. Entering the hall, he walked around, noticing that this was just like his house. Everything seemed the same except the lack of color. Walking through the hall, it felt uneasy to him. He even felt like something was looking at him, watching him walk slowly nearby. Near the end of the hall, he heard a sound of footsteps, multiple at a time, coming towards his direction. Quickly, he hid within a room next to him. He held his breath as the footsteps stopped suddenly. Looking at the room entrance, he saw lights beaming from the hall as he watched in horror until the lights disappeared. He sighed in relief, only to be jumped on by a couple of people in military-like attire. They had gas masks on. Their faces were hidden. The one in front aimed his assault rifle directly at Billy, who was more than terrified. "Sir, it's a kid. It's not what we're looking for," the man behind him said. "Anything is possible," the man in front said. "But it wouldn't make sense for what the man behind him cut himself off as he looked up. Above the man in front, a large red eyeball stared down and glared at the man below. Sir!" the man behind yelled. The man in front looked behind him, confused only to see pure white arms pop from the walls and the floor. Before the man could react, the arms grabbed onto him tightly. They began pulling his arms and legs. Soon the sound of tearing flesh was heard. Both the man at the door and Billy watched in horror as the man in between them was being ripped from limb to limb, only to be a bloody mess on the gray floor. Nothing but his head and body were left attached to his body. Both the man at the door and Billy screamed in horror. A couple more soldier-like men walked in and saw what shook them. Before they could react to the situation, more eyes appeared on the walls and arms began to reach for them. The men and Billy panicked as they ran out of the room. It didn't take long for gunshots to be heard throughout the hallway. Hiding in another room, Billy tried to calm down, not realizing that the man from before was beside him. Turning his head, Billy nearly screeched in fear before quickly getting his mouth shut by the man. He held his hand on Billy's mouth tightly. "Listen carefully," he whispered. "This thing listens for any noises, so stay quiet." Billy nodded, and the man let his hand off Billy's mouth. "What's your name, kid?" he asked. "Billy," he responded softly. "Mine is Marcus. Look, I understand what we saw wasn't exactly great. In fact, it was much worse than expected. Threat level was small, but it turns out these things always get some kind of surprise." Marcus removed his mask. revealing his red hair and green eyes. His hair was short and slightly spiky, and he had a young face. "Put this on. It'll help you calm down. Just don't take it off and relax. Everything will be fine," he said with a smile. Billy quickly put on the mask as he breathed heavily. Marcus sat up and looked around the entrance of the room. His eyes widened as he saw one of his teammates dead, slowly being eaten by a mouth on the floor. It was slowly chewing and crunching upon the flesh and bone. Quickly looking away, Marcus crouched down to meet Billy's eyes. "Do you remember how you got in here?" Marcus asked him. Yeah, the bathroom," Billy stuttered. Marcus nodded. "I want you to get on my back and close your eyes unless I tell you otherwise," Marcus ordered. Billy nodded and began to climb on his back. The man picked him up and inhaled deeply. Fear grew within Marcus, but he quickly shook it off if it meant saving Billy. "And go," he said to himself. He then began to run out of the room and down the hallway. Eyes appeared on the walls as he ran. Arms began reaching for him once again. From his hip on the right, he pulled a pin off of his smoke grenade he kept on his belt. This blinded the eyes from seeing where he was. Seeing the door that led into the bathroom, he quickly got them inside and closed the door. Sitting down, allowing Billy to relax. Looking up, Marcus sat up again and saw the other side of the mirror. A nice, clean one, other than the gray and smell of death on the side they were on. "Is that it, Billy?" Marcus asked. Billy nodded as he looked at himself. Marcus then touched the mirror, but his hand did not go through it. This confused even Billy, who climbed up and tried going through. Nothing. "Why won't it let me go through?" Billy asked worriedly. Marcus looked and studied it, eventually realizing the situation they were in. He then sighed and placed a hand on Billy's shoulder. "Billy, I want you to stay here. I'm gonna distract this thing, and when I do, I want you to quickly jump through the mirror," he ordered. "What about you?" Billy asked. "Don't worry about it. We'll both get out of here. Just listen and you'll get out of this hell," Marcus explained. Billy nodded as Marcus walked over to the door. Pulling out his knife, he walked out of the room, the door wide open. He crouched down and stabbed at the floor. It pierced through as if it was flesh. Black blood spilled and eyes popped around him. Without hesitation, Marcus began running. "Now, Billy!" he yelled. Billy quickly jumped through and fell onto the floor of his bathroom. Staring at the mirror, he waited for Marcus to come through, but nothing. He still held the gas mask that Marcus had given him. After a while, Billy got up and went to the mirror and tried to touch it, only for it to be solid. A tear began to leave his eyes as he realized what had happened to Marcus. He walked away slowly from the mirror, trying to hold the tears from falling from his eyes. Before he left, however, the tapping was heard once again. So that, my lovely friends, was once again Mirror, Mirror, What's Behind the Wall by GhostInk. A name that's been on this channel quite a bit. Probably about to get his own playlist at this point. I think he will. So check that out if you want to. Man is an awesome author. He's legit a kid, in my opinion. He'll say otherwise, but I'll say he is, because that's the person I am. Anyway, if you enjoyed this story, please do check out the other ones by him, and also please do consider subscribing to the channel. You could hit that sub button, hit that bell icon, follow me on the social medias platforms, and do things like support me over Patreon or Coffee or memberships. All optional, all appreciated. I don't really know what to say at this point. I don't know. I'm tired. I think I'm gonna go take a shower. Alright. Well, hopefully you all have a beautiful day, and I will see you on the next video. But until then, sleep well.